the buyer comes in with 10%, which is $50,000, and the seller comes in and holds 10%, which is $50,000, and then the bank finances the other $400,000.
Mm.
That's kind of a combination of a seller's note, so it can go both ways.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us back on the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. I am so thrilled to have Darren Smith join us today. Darren is one of my networking groups, and he is a specialist in helping businessmen sell their businesses. So let's first, if you will, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do?
Sure, absolutely. So prior to me being a business broker, which I've been for 4 years now, I owned a textile company in New York for 22 plus years, highly successful. But as the industry changed, I was looking to develop other revenue streams and looked very heavily into buying another business. I met many different business brokers along the way, looked at a ton of different businesses and really couldn't find anything that I really liked and thought I would be really good at. But I did develop a relationship with a business broker who actually became my mentor, and we have a great relationship today. And I got into the business brokerage business with him and Murphy Business Sales after looking at other business brokerages as well. What I love about it is I'm able to use my skill set of being a prior small business owner, an entrepreneur, and also my MBA from the Lubin School of Business at Pace University comes in really handy for me to be able to analyze P&Ls and tax returns.
Whatever happened to the textile business?
The textile business, we had to fold it into another business because of the competition that we were facing from overseas. The industry was in a rapid decline a few years prior to COVID, the whole industry in general. And then with the onset of COVID, with everything closing up and retailers consolidating, we just kind of thought it would be best to fold it in with another company. So that's what we did.
And so you no longer own that?
I do not, no.
So hold on one second. I'm just going to move the mic a little bit. I just realized that this thing is... Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Am I coming through clearly? You're
Yes.
coming through great. Okay, sorry about that. Let's keep on going. So I've got a business in New Jersey. I have a laundromat, and I want to sell my laundromat. What's this? How do I approach you? What do you do for me? And what does it look like?
So I think that the first thing people that are thinking about selling their business should do is engage the services of a business broker like myself early on in the process, right? Not kind of wake up on Monday morning and decide that they want to sell their business. And the reason why I say that is because we need to prepare a business for sale. And there's many things that go into the preparation of a business for sale. One of them being, you own this laundromat, but how often are you going to the laundromat? Is this something that you're involved in 40, 50, 60 hours a week? You know, as someone that's looking to buy this laundromat, I'm probably not going to want to work those 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but I'm going to want to own that laundromat as an absentee or a semi-absentee owner, right? So what we'd like to do is to work with the seller and to put in a management approach into the laundromat, right? So that it makes it an absentee or a semi-absentee operation. It makes it more appealing to a buyer when they're coming in to buy that laundromat, right? The other thing I would look at is, laundromats today are automated, right? Are you using the coin operated system, right? The coin operating system requires more people to be there. It requires the seller to be there, right? Just to make sure that nobody's stealing the money from them. but now laundromats are automated. So it allows for an owner of a laundromat, when it's automated, to spend less time in the business, right? So that's the type of things that we're looking at. We want to look at things that would make it more attractive and more appealing to a buyer.
And since this isn't our first conversation, I know that one of the things that you look at, first of all, let me just say this. Darren, I really appreciate the fact that you have like a seat of the pants understanding of both what the buyer needs and what the seller needs, and that you bring that to bear. In one of our previous conversations, you also were telling me about structuring the business and the finances of the business so it's most appealing. Can you talk to that?
Yes. So the first thing I like to talk about in financing with the seller is to ask them their appetite for seller financing, right? So what do I mean by seller financing? Seller financing could be if you have a business for sale for, say, $500,000, and you want to seller finance 50% or 60% of the purchase price, right? So I'd come to you and I'd say, I'll give you $250,000 down, and I'd like you, David, to hold the other note for $250,000. And then we work together to structure that seller financing piece of it, whether it be over a 5-year period or a 7-year period, a 10-year period, at an agreed upon interest rate, right? The seller note could have special covenants on it, right? That you'll receive 100% of that seller's note each year if the revenue achieves X, if the EBITDA reaches a certain benchmark. So those are covenants that we can place on that seller's note. The most ideal situation with a seller's note would be if it's seller financing in combination with an SBA loan. Okay. What do I mean by that? An SBA loan is, now we take that $500,000 business that we're selling and we send it to one of our lenders that we have a relationship with, and they look at it and they pre-qualify it for an SBA acquisition loan. So the buyer only needs to come to the table with 10%, which would be the $50,000. The bank would cover the other $450,000, but it might be in a combination with a seller's note. Usually the seller's note is 10% of that 400 or of that 500,000, right? So what we do is the buyer comes in with 10%, which is $50,000, and the seller comes in and holds 10%, which is $50,000, and then the bank finances the other $400,000. That's kind of a combination of a seller's note, so it can go both ways.
And how important are the financials going into a sale?
The financials are everything, right? Because at the end of the day, the business is valued based on the cash flow, right? Not on the revenue. I've sold businesses where, a business that's only doing $1 million would sell for, a higher value than, say, a business that was doing $2 million, right? Because from that $1 million, the seller was netting, $700,000, right? Where the $2 million, they were only taking out $400,000. So it's really not based on revenue, but really based on that cash flow model, right? When we go into businesses that are worth, north of, like, say, $3 million, we kind of want to do that blended average between, the cash flow and the EBITDA and the revenue, and put all those multiples together, and then, look at it over a 3-year horizon. When we're valuing the business, we'll do a cash flow model over a 2-year look back, with kind of anticipating what that cash flow is going to look like 1 year ahead.
Talking about valuation, that's one of the services you offer, right? Can you talk to that?
Yeah. So Murphy Business, my company, offers several different valuations. As an experienced business broker, doing dozens of deals each year, I could do what we call a broker's opinion of value. That's basically, if you, David, come to me and say, I want to sell that laundromat, and you're doing, a few $1 million in revenue, I could do that broker's opinion of value for you in-house with our software, and tell you what I think your business should sell for, what we would list your business for. Another type of valuation that we do is what we call a certified business valuation.
Mhm.
We do those as well. We have partners that do those with us. And you usually see that done for businesses that have revenues north of that $2 million. For people that are looking to gift any sort of money based on the sale of a business, for gift tax, we'll adhere to IRS standards on that. And we'll
Mhm.
also do certified business valuations when it comes to divorce proceedings, right?
Mhm.
Somebody owns a business, they're getting divorced. We'll do a certified business appraisal for that.
Mhm. And then, so I like that. So what you're saying is that people who are in different life stages, you mentioned divorce, you mentioned gift, estate, I imagine, is one of those things where the value of a property, of a business becomes very critical to being able to determine someone's tax liability or divorce, an equitable divorce settlement.
That's correct. It's an asset, right? The business is an asset that somebody holds. It's the same as real estate. There's a value placed on that asset. And when you're going to sell that asset, how much are we going to sell it for? So it's really important to make sure that the appraisal is done in a fair and objective way. So by doing it and having a certified appraiser do it kind of goes a long way. And if it becomes a point of litigation, we could have expert witnesses and the appraiser actually come speak to how they came up with that valuation.
Okay, cool. Hey, you know what? Let's just switch gears for a minute.
Sure.
What turns you on? What in your business brings you the greatest joy?
The greatest joy comes from selling a business where it's it becomes a personal relationship, right? I'll tell a story. I had a orthodontist practice that I was selling, and it was a story where there was a death in the family, and the orthodontist had passed away, and it was being run by the family members in conjunction with some of the other orthodontists that were involved in that practice. And it was really important for the seller, who was the husband, to keep his wife's legacy alive, right? To keep the name of the practice, to keep the patients happy, and just continue to offer that care to everybody that came through the door. It was a challenging sale, but we ended up doing it. I think that to me it was really a rewarding feeling when the asset purchase agreement got signed and the deal finally closed. That turns me on.
Yeah, it's so much about relationship. It's so much about the people you work with and the rewards of serving people right and doing the right thing by people.
Yeah, and I'll even go a step further. I mean, it was interesting when I was approached by the seller. He even said to me, he's like, "Can you help me?" He's like, "I called 3 other people before I called you. One of them specializing in dental practices, selling dental practices, and he told me he couldn't help me. Do you think you can help me?" I said, "I'll try," and I did, and it happened.
So what was the key to your success in this transaction?
I think it was persistence and kind of being challenged, by having somebody tell him that it couldn't be done. I was out to kind of prove them wrong, and it was a great feeling, and I got it done. And everyone always says to me, "It's like, how did you get that done? How did you get that?" Maybe it was a little bit of luck involved, persistence, a combination of all those things, but it happened, and it was just a great feeling.
And then it's the network, right? Because I imagine over time, we're part of a business network, but I imagine over time you have a network of accountants, of attorneys, of other people who you can turn to, who either to help you market a business or speak to specific issues that a business might have?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. So when I first started in this business, 4 years ago, I did a lot of paid advertising, whether it be on Facebook or Google ads. And, I still do that, but I do that 75% less. My budget's allocated 75% less than I did 4 years ago. And the reason why is because of my extensive network that I built and the referral network that I built too. I mean,
Mm.
I think, probably 75% of the deals that I've closed so far in 2023 have been referrals from previous owners that I've sold their business, and they referred my name out to people that they knew to call me to sell their business. So, yes.
So let me just get clarification so I understand. Do you tend mostly to work with sellers of business? Do you also work with buyers?
So most of my work is on the sell side. Unfortunately, our business isn't structured like a real estate business.
Mm-hmm.
We are transactional brokers, meaning we work with both the buyer and the seller. Once a buyer calls us and they're interested in one of the listings that we're presenting, I'll work both sides, but we really work with the seller, right? Like my main goal is to find somebody that's looking to sell their business, to look at the financials, to price it correctly, to prepare the business, to be successfully marketed, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm a marketing company, right? I'm taking what I see, what I have, and repackaging it to make it look good to the public. And then the buyers come. They'll come from our advertising side, they'll come from my networking side, but the buyers will come. If you make a good presentation and it's fairly priced, they're buyers for pretty much every business.
Interesting. And I imagine, in my business, I often run into people who are owners of small to medium businesses with very smart accountants. And the accountants are very skilled. In fact, in my business, it's often that the accountants are at cross purposes with me because they want to minimize someone's taxes, and I want them to have high income so they qualify for whatever they want. How does that work in your world, where somebody has an accountant who has carefully presented the numbers in the past?
So, I work with accountants all the time, but it's interesting that you mention that because most of the time when I'm working with the sellers, the accountants don't even know the business is for sale until I actually ask the seller, hey, can I speak to your accountant? I need to go over the returns. I'm looking for add backs, right? Like personal expenses taken out of the business that we could add back that could collectively go into that bucket of getting what we call that cash flow number, right? So, there's a lot of tax liabilities for a seller when they go to sell the business that sometimes their accountants can't help them with. And we have strategies and other partners that we work with that can help the seller defer their capital gains taxes from the sale of the business. And hopefully I answered your question, David, on that.
You did a great job.
Okay.
Okay, where do we go from here? What else do you want to talk about?
It's your call. You tell me. Is there anything that I think you hit it all correctly. I think that the most important thing, I try to stress all the time is, like anybody, that's thinking about selling their business in 4 to 5 years, reach out, call me. Let's have that conversation. Don't wait to, a day before you're thinking about selling or a month before you're thinking about selling, because you can leave a lot of money on the table if you don't kind of do that planning, right? A lot of people refer to as exit strategy. What's your exit plan? What are you doing to kind of capitalize on the maximum value of all that blood, sweat, and tears that you put into your business over the last 30 years, right? And most people don't think about that. There's just some easy fixes that you can do to maximize that value of the business that you built.
Like what?
Just, like we talked about before, like, there's so much cash flow. So instead of like taking home an extra $7,500,000 a year on, put a manager in place, right? Get that manager there so that when you're ready to sell, there's that, not everything is on you. Like, because the first question people ask is, tell me about the owner. What is he doing? So what happens when the owner's gone? Are all the relationships going to go away? Right. And that kind of scares people and they run away, right? Like, you're the owner, you only want to stay on for a month. Like, well, what happens when you leave? Who's going to take care of the accounts? Who's going to help me? Like, so like, don't worry, David. We have somebody for you, right? Like, the manager, he's been with me for 5 years. He's willing to stay on. He understands and he knows about the business being, sold. He's willing to stay on. He's willing to put it in writing. You could do a consulting agreement with him to keep him on. This provides comfort to a buyer and makes your business more valuable, right? Putting an extra salesperson on, putting an extra operations manager on. Those are things that go a long way that people just don't think about, right? So the $100,000 that you spent, each year for the last 3 years, maybe it cost you $300,000. Not only do you make more money by having somebody in place, but you might be able to get another $600,000-$700,000 more for your business when it comes time to sell it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing you right, the optimal time if you're planning on selling your business in 3 to 5 years, the optimal time for someone to reach out to you, Darren, is now, 3, 4, 5 years in advance, even if you're not ready to sign on the dotted line, but to start the conversation, to start the planning process.
That's
Maybe
correct.
planning in a sense.
Right. So let's start. Let's have that conversation. Let me do either a broker's opinion and value or a certified business appraisal. Let's get that done. Let's talk about it. Okay. And then let's update that every year and then have another conversation again, right? And make those changes every year. I'll go even a step further. Let's say that, that business valuation cost you, $3,600 for that certified business appraisal. When you're ready to sell it and I sell your business, we take that $3,600 off of the commission. It's not above and beyond our commission, right? I'm working with you so we can maximize your value and we could sell your business at the end of the day. That's what we're here for. So it's a win-win situation for everybody involved.
Okay. And like, what kind of businesses, let's say over the past year or two, what are the most interesting businesses you've sold?
So, like I said before, I did an orthodontist practice. I sold a physical therapy practice. I've sold multiple HVAC companies. That's a big deal. Like anything in the home service area, right? Sold a construction company. I sold an art studio. I sold a sheet metal manufacturer in Southern New Jersey. I sold a coffee distributor, a very, very large wholesale coffee distributor in upstate New York. We sold that to a very large distributor here in New Jersey. So that was a very successful transaction. I sold a marine e-commerce company that was out in the Hamptons. So, it just kind of shows you the breadth of different businesses that I've sold. Industry agnostic, don't really focus on a specific business. But, I always like to say I'm like the Goldman Sachs of, Main Street to lower middle market, right? And, brokers don't want to touch what I touch. And, again, referral networks, I get a lot of phone calls every week from brokers that don't want to touch the smaller size businesses, but because it's a very personal business relationship that you develop with the sellers, and it's a whole different dynamic. A small
Mhm.
business owners is a lot different than a larger business owner, right? They need their hands held much tighter. The buyer is usually less sophisticated, it's usually their first transaction. So there's a lot of different dynamics that go into it. So
Hmm.
that's what I love to do, and that's what we're in business here to do.
Let me ask you first from the seller side and then from the buyer side. If you were going to identify 3 or 4 characteristics of a successful seller, what would they be?
So the first characteristic is motivated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Motivated. It's happened to me before where I would sell somebody's business or I have it sold. We got the asset purchase agreement in front of them, signed by the buyer, and then the seller called me up and said, "You know what, Darren, I thought about it. I went to Europe and I got back and the business seemed to run fine by itself. I don't need to sell it right now." Maybe he was just fishing. So, he wasn't motivated. So motivation
Mm-hmm.
is the key, right? You're ready, willing, and able. You want to get rid of the business, you want to sell it, right?
It's
So,
time.
right. Being realistic, right, about what it's worth. I do the appraisal for you. I tell you it's worth $1 million. You think it's worth $2 million, right? If it's worth what I think it's $1 million and you think it's worth $2 million and you want to put it up and list it for $2 million, guess what? You're going to be one of those statistics of the unsold businesses, right? Because you need to be realistic in the business valuation, because although it might be a first time buyer, they're smart, right? And they also might be looking for financing from the bank. So unless you're realistic in the valuation, it's not going to get sold because you can't get that bank financing, right? Especially in the businesses that are under that $1 million mark, where most of the entrepreneurs are coming to the table with some sort of bank financing. So those are the 2 keys: being realistic and being motivated.
And then starting early enough so that you can do your magic.
Yes, starting early.
Now,
I
from
think if you're starting early enough, you're motivated, right? You're definitely motivated, and starting early enough allows you, when you're ready to sell it, to be realistic,
Hmm.
because you've already been through that process and your mindset is already there.
Now, from the buy side, if I was going to buy a business, what are the characteristics of a buyer that, because, you're putting down real money, you're putting down blood, sweat, and tears.
Mhm.
What makes a successful buyer of someone else's business?
I think I think what makes a successful buyer is somebody that has relevant industry experience. If you're going to buy a medical billing company, which, it's a company I have for sale now, you don't want to be a baker or someone in the bakery, right? You want to be somebody that has, experience either working in a doctor's office or, working in a billing company, so that when they buy that medical billing company, they can make that transition very easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think relevant industry experience can make for a successful buyer. And I think also what makes for a successful buyer is kind of follow the same blueprint that the seller was doing before you bought it. If the seller's hours are 7 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there must be a reason why he's starting at 7 and is ending at 3, right? Because his clients expect him to be there early and have everything in place, by a certain time. So now you're going to come in and you're going to, instead of coming in from 7 to 3, you're going to start your route at 10 o'clock and end at 6 o'clock. Well, guess what? The likelihood that you're not going to succeed is very likely, right? So kind of, following the blueprint from the seller is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
You could deviate, but you really kind of want to stay on track to what they were doing before.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. So what's our takeaway message if we were going to tell our listeners 3 things about selling the business? What 3 things would you want them to know?
So if you're going to sell your business, 3 things: start early, right? Start your planning, your exit strategy early. Don't wait till the last minute. Be realistic, okay? And I know it's an emotional process, but let's keep that emotion in check. And I'll work with them on all those 3 things to kind of make it a successful transaction.
Really appreciate that. A lot of wisdom there. A lot of wisdom there. This has been your Mortgage Made Easy podcast with my guest, Darren Smith. I'm Dave Steinberg, your mortgage guy. And if you have any questions, we'll post Darren's information and look forward to seeing you around. Darren, let's talk some more. Thank you.
Yes, David, thank you for having me on the show today. I appreciate it. I think it's appropriate.
So just so you know, what we're going to do is we're going to pick up on the piece with the buyers, and we're going to look around and try to find the place where it fits. In other words, go back into the previous section where we talked about buyers. And also, this would be a great standalone piece for a 2-minute Facebook and LinkedIn posts that we want to do this both ways, both inclusion in the main text and then in the main podcast and then it's standalone. So I'm going to do an introduction for the standalone, and then you can just work this. So this is Dave Steinberg. I'm sitting with my friend Darren Smith, and he is an amazing guy. He's a business broker, been in the business for 4 years. He and I were having a conversation about buyers. And, as a business broker, you generally focus on sellers, right? And you're trying to help the seller maximize their sales price. But you have something that you just said that I'd like to pull out a little bit, go in a little bit deeper and understand where there's value for a buyer working with a trusted business broker.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's funny because we were having the conversation, and when you're selling a business, I'm always approached by buyers, but they come into the fold by themselves, right? Not represented by any other particular business broker, right? So here I am selling a business and talking with a buyer that's not working with a broker. That's common.
They don't have equivalent representation.
They do not. So what happens is I become the transaction broker, right? But thinking about it on the other side, if it's not my listing and a buyer finds a business that they're interested in buying, I would love to become involved with them, help them structure that LOI, right? Help them, maybe come up with that piece of seller.
LOI is letter of intent.
Letter of intent. That
Okay.
seller financing piece becomes important in the structure of the deal. And kind of walk them through that whole process and make them feel comfortable, and also tell them, hey, that business you're selling for, $500,000, but I don't think it's worth $500,000, right? I think it's worth $350,000. Make an offer at $350,000, and these are the reasons why. Okay. And if they come back to you and they say, well, my seller wants every bit of that $500,000, then let's get creative on how to get them to that $500,000, right? So we'll do that $350,000 down, and then we'll become creative on that back end of that other $150,000. And we'll do either an earnout or seller financing with a covenant on it or something to kind of bridge that gap of that $150,000, right? So there's things like that we could become creative and make a deal work. Also,
that's great. You really said a couple of things. So let's try to unpack that, because what I'm hearing you say is there's 3 elements here. One element is you bring your expertise to bear to express an opinion as to the value of the business.
Correct.
And then secondly, what I'm hearing you say is, generally when you're buying a business, there's a lot of moving parts, right? And who of the staff will be there the day after the acquisition? How will you finance the acquisition? Will the seller take part of that acquisition? Will there be bank financing? And many buyers don't know the ins and outs of all of that. And so working with a guy like Darren, so if you're looking to buy a business and maybe you found a business through one of your contacts, but having a Darren Smith on your team would add huge value to what you're doing.
Correct. So it's not only the letter of intent stage, right? It's the due diligence stage, right? You can work with your accountants, you can work with your attorneys, but sometimes by having a consultant or somebody that's been doing specifically business acquisitions, has been in the market, looked at, dozens of deals worth millions and millions of dollars, I can help you kind of walk through that due diligence and possibly catch some really important things that might kind of make you think twice about buying that business, right? Or it might make you think that maybe it is a really good business for me to buy, right? That could be client concentration. That could be having a expert at that particular business that might no longer be there when you buy it. Possible clients that might go away, once you purchase it. Maybe there's favorable terms that a supplier was giving the seller, right? Because they have a relationship over 25 years and, it really kind of helped their cash flow. Now you're going to go in and you're going to buy that business and they're going to want COD. Well, how does that impact your cash flow? So there's certain things that, by having the experience of looking at multiple deals over the years, I can kind of help you walk through, those particular due diligence items in any industry, in any business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Darren. Again, this is Dave Steinberg, your mortgage guy, and we've been sitting with Darren Smith. Darren is a business broker with Murphy Business Sales, and just a hell of a nice guy. Can't recommend him highly enough. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, David, thank you for having me.